This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
Becky Lynch is going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
All right, everybody, it's that time of the week again. It's time for the current state of WWE. Anthony DeMarco joins us every single week here on the WWE Podcast to talk about the current things going on, the big things going on, and there's really not much, and there's not really anything bigger going on right now than the draft as we speak, guys. Monday Night Raw is going on, and they have, right now as we speak, round 1 and round 2 have been revealed. And there are some surprising picks here, and we'll jump into that in just a minute. But first, I'd like to welcome Anthony. How you doing, man?
Not too bad, man. Pretty eventful draft so far. I only saw the first round tonight, but by the sounds of it, it's that round 2 had a bit of shockers as well, eh?
Yeah, I mean, let's just jump into it. And guys, again, I just want to be clear. Right now I only have round 1 and round 2 from Raw. In the books, it's on WWE's website. That's where I'm getting this. And I have not seen the rest of the draft. And if you don't want to know, if you don't want to hear the results of the draft, well, then you might want to skip ahead or wait until until you've watched Raw. I'm giving you a bit of a spoiler alert here. So let's jump into it, man. Okay, so Raw, and we'll talk about Friday Night SmackDown and their picks. But in the first round, here are the picks for Raw. They get Rhea Ripley, Seth Rollins, those are the top 2. Before I go to SmackDown, what do you make of Rhea Ripley going to SmackDown, or rather Rhea Ripley, the SmackDown Women's Champion, going to Raw? And for me, the biggest shock, Seth Rollins staying on Raw as well.
Well, number one, I'm really happy that Rhea Ripley went number 1. And I think after Bianca Belair got drafted to SmackDown on Friday night, it was a foregone conclusion that Rhea Ripley would go to Raw. And the presumption is that they're going to do what they did with Becky and Charlotte a few years back, and they're just going to simply swap titles. And I think that having Rhea Ripley be the first pick of this round, or of day 2 of the draft, I think is really cool. I think she has reached that level. I think it's indicative of what WWE thinks of her. And I also think the fact that she was drafted separate from the Judgment Day really kind of shows that she's like in another stratosphere. And that's saying something, because the Judgment Day has really been on a roll here for the last several months. But I'm really happy to see how elevated Rhea Ripley is by WWE Creative. And for Seth Rollins, I mean, I was kind of with you. I think that he would have fit very nicely on SmackDown. I think there's a lot of unfinished business between him and Roman Reigns. But obviously they have bigger plans for Seth Rollins. And I think that this is kind of them showing that they still feel that Seth Rollins is one of the faces of Monday Night Raw, and maybe they felt that that Raw needed his star power. You know, to be fair, I still do agree he should have went to SmackDown, but to give them credit, and in my maybe the benefit of the doubt, is that when Seth Rollins was on SmackDown in 2021, it did feel like Raw was missing something. And now you have Seth going back to Raw with Drew McIntyre, with Cody Rhodes, and that's going to kind of offset the star power of, let's say, Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley on the other side, and a returning AJ Styles in a lot of ways. So I would have liked to see Seth and Roman on the same brand. But on the other hand, I understand why they want Seth over on Monday Night Raw, just so he could blaze his own trail, and maybe they don't want him to be in the shadow of Roman Reigns.
It's a fair argument. I mean, Seth Rollins on SmackDown to me was I would have bet a significant amount of money he was going to SmackDown, given that the feud with Roman Reigns is unfinished, so much left to tell, the history is there, it's all right there. That said, I mean, there are some big positives from this. Number one, he is arguably probably the favorite to win the World Heavyweight Championship. You and I, as you mentioned, are big proponents of him carrying a singles title or the World Heavyweight Championship. I know that he had a quick run with the U.S. title, but outside of that, it's been years. It's criminal that he hasn't held a major championship in that long. But just because he's on Raw also doesn't mean he can't cross paths with Roman Reigns and have a match with him at WrestleMania. If they want to have a cross-brand matchup with those two, I think they can do it. It's just on a bigger stage. Say Seth Rollins wins the Royal Rumble. Well, then he's eligible to likely face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania if, of course, Mr. Hollywood decides to give WWE the shaft again. Then you have Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 40. And I actually am of the belief that Roman Reigns has a significant chance to carry the Undisputed Championship all the way to WrestleMania 40. And that's a separate conversation. But so Seth and Roman can still happen, and it can still happen this year, actually, if they want to, but likely more now if he wins the Rumble. That said, also with Rhea Ripley, yeah, she deserves a number one. I mean, she absolutely deserves this number one pick. She is one of the most improved superstars of the last 365 days. Obviously, as you mentioned, yeah, they're going to swap titles, and it's hilarious to listen to Cole on SmackDown, who was it Cole or Wade? I couldn't remember which one of them. They were just so perplexed about, wow, the Raw Women's Champions drafted to SmackDown, and the SmackDown Women's Champions drafted to Raw. What are they going to do? It's like, dude, you've gone through like a dozen drafts. What do you think they're going to do, right? But it makes sense. They're going to swap belts, and eventually Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair are going to have that matchup, probably at, maybe at WrestleMania for a unification match. That's a possibility. And so moving on, though, we still have two more draft picks in round one, and that is for SmackDown. We got Austin Theory going to SmackDown and Charlotte staying on SmackDown. What's your take on this?
Well, Charlotte, I'll start with Charlotte. I think that Charlotte, in a lot of ways, has kind of taken a back seat. Like, isn't she almost kind of like going into like a Legends type of role, like a Randy Orton? It's crazy how fast time flies. It's absolutely nuts. But I think that Charlotte being on SmackDown is the right call because, she's been on Raw and SmackDown almost the same amount of time, but she's always felt more like a SmackDown woman, more like a SmackDown wrestler. And I think that she's really found a home over there. And I do think that eventually her versus Bianca Belair is something that you want to get to. And, Charlotte in a lot of ways still is kind of like the gatekeeper. She still is kind of like the benchmark in a lot of ways, the elder statesman of the women's division. So I think her versus Bianca is going to be a match that you're going to get to sometime over the next 6 to 10 months or so. And Austin Theory, it's predictable. The IC title goes to Monday Night Raw. The US title goes to SmackDown, just almost by default. And I think Austin Theory, and I believe you mentioned it on your weekend review show, kind of needs a refresh. He's kind of been in a holding pattern, spinning his tires a bit since the WrestleMania match against John Cena. That was pretty underwhelming, and not just the match, just the build in general really was a letdown in a lot of ways. So I think that's going to be good for him. Fresh coat of paint on his character. And the other thing that's weird, and it's kind of funny as someone who grew up in the Ruthless Aggression era, is Triple H in his first time running his own draft and kind of tinkering with the brand split right to his likings. He's kind of setting things up how it was in the early on days of the Ruthless Aggression era, isn't he? World Heavyweight Championship and Intercontinental title on Monday Night Raw, WWE Championship and US title over on SmackDown. So it's really cool in a lot of ways to see how he's kind of bringing back some nostalgia, but in a modern day version.
I didn't even think about that. That's very true, right? You have it exactly right. I didn't even think of it in that context, but yes, that's how he set it up. I don't know if he consciously did it that way or if it's just the way that he set it up because the stars fell that way. But I don't hate it. I think it's a great way to balance the brands, and so I think that we're going to see a benefit here of the draft that we haven't been able to see in years past if they stick to the damn rules. And as far as my thoughts on Charlotte and Austin Theory, I have no problem with it. It's interesting with Charlotte on SmackDown. She's not going anywhere, but Becky Lynch going to SmackDown is going to be interesting given their history of really not liking one another, and if they have another confrontation and all that kind of thing that brewed a year or two ago.
I think Becky's on Raw, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Is she?
I'm pretty sure.
Is she on Raw? Oh, okay. I got to look at the Becky Lynch. Hold on, I got to look at it. You're probably right. Becky Lynch is on Raw. Sorry, yeah, you're right. So the big matchup, as you mentioned, Becky Lynch, or rather Bianca Belair and Charlotte is something that hasn't happened. And also Ronda Rousey. I mean, we don't know where she's going to land, but what about Ronda Rousey and Bianca Belair if she ever comes out of her tag team? With what's her name?
Shayna Baszler.
Yeah, Shayna Baszler. If she ever is able to get out of that tag team and go back to singles competition and actually be relevant, there's a big matchup too there with Rhea Ripley that she has yet to have, and also Becky Lynch. Also hasn't happened, depending on where she lands. There's a lot that Ronda Rousey hasn't done yet. Not that I'm advocating for her to be the central figure of the women's division, but let's be honest, there's a lot of money left on the table here if they do it right. Now, moving on to round 2, or rather Austin Theory. I don't know what to say about that other than you guys heard my comments last night, and to your point, they're going to do an even swap with the IC and US, and that's exactly what they did here. I have no problem with it. I think it'll be a benefit to Austin Theory to have a new environment to work in. Now, round 2, another big surprise here. The Undisputed Tag Team Champions of Sami and Kevin go to Raw. I'm a bit perplexed on this because if they're drafted to Raw and they're undisputed and they're carrying both championships, well, does that mean that SmackDown's not going to have a tag team championship, or they're going to create one? Or is it just that the tag team championship's just going to live on Raw? I'm not sure about that. What's your take?
The only thing that I could guess of this is that as your undisputed tag team champions, and this is assuming that they're keeping just one tag team title, if you hold the tag titles, you can float between shows, similar to the women's tag team titles. But when and if you are to ever lose those titles, you will be assigned to the Raw brand. That's the best way that I could kind of hypothesize as to what they're going for. Now, obviously, there's the possibility that they split the titles once again, kind of like what they had in the Ruthless Aggression era as well. And leading up to WrestleMania, you saw instances where the Usos would only defend the Raw tag titles or the SmackDown tag titles. So maybe eventually they are looking to split these tag titles up. And I guess if you're doing a hard brand split, and I guess I'm going to give Triple H the benefit of the doubt that he's going to adhere to his own rules, and we could kind of get into the free agent things as well in a bit. But I think that my best theory would be that when and if they are to lose those tag team titles, and it's not when, or it's not if, when they eventually lose those titles, they will be assigned to the Raw brand.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that makes sense. But I mean, I haven't watched Raw, so perhaps they framed it that way, or it'll be explained later that even though they were drafted, as you mentioned, that just means that if they lose the belts, their home will be Raw, and because that will eventually happen. I think that's the only way to explain this, because otherwise it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that they're carrying the Undisputed Tag Team Championships. That includes the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, and yet they're only on Raw, which leaves SmackDown without a Tag Team Championship. I don't know what they're going to do. They do have to figure that out. But the other pick for Raw was Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and and Dominic, the whole Judgment Day. And then SmackDown got the Usos and Rey Mysterio, Santos Escobar, Joaquin Wilde, Cruz del Toro, the LWO. What did you make of those rounding out round 2?
Well, I mean, the SmackDown getting the Usos does make sense. Obviously, they were teasing maybe a split of the Bloodline completely, but there's still a lot of tread left on those tires in terms of in terms of the story that is to be told for the Bloodline. So I think that makes a lot of sense. The LWO, I think they found a nice home on SmackDown as well. And I think that Santos Escobar is a rising star in a lot of ways. And Monday Night Raw, I mean, the Judgment Day makes a lot of sense. I think they have a lot of story left to be told, similar to the Bloodline. They have a lot of story left to be told with Rhea Ripley. And, you have a lot of factions over on SmackDown with the LWO, with the Bloodline, with the OC. So the Judgment Day, I think, would have made it kind of a crowded scene over on SmackDown.
That's true. I mean, but let's start here. The Usos, as you said, and I think everyone expected, there's almost no chance that the Usos go to Raw. It would have made no sense, because then, I mean, you're stopping a storyline that has so much left to be told, and the whole story of the Usos losing to Kevin and Sami on Friday night in the tag team title match. was that what is Roman going to do if the Usos lose? What's he going to do? What's he going to say? And then what was Solo Sikoa out there for? Was he actually out there instructed by Roman to take out the Usos? Was he supposed to help them? There's so much left to be untold. It would have made no sense at all for the Usos to go to Raw. So that was a absolute lock it down pick. Makes sense. So the Bloodline remains an anchor on SmackDown. I like it. And as far as Judgment Day staying on Raw, I think that is also a nice staple for Monday nights. They have kind of found their home on Monday nights, and also you won't want the massive heel factions on the same show. It would be too heel heavy in that regard. And having the LWO on SmackDown, I think, will be a nice counter to the Bloodline if and when that happens as well. Now let's talk a little bit about Friday night SmackDown's big picks here. We won't go through them all, but having round one with the Bloodline, Roman and Solo Sikoa and Heyman staying on SmackDown, I mean, I don't know. Well, there's not much to say about that other than, makes sense and a no problem. But Cody staying on Raw and Becky Lynch going to Raw. What did you make of that?
Of Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch going to Raw?
Well, so Cody Rhodes and Becky Lynch, yeah.
Oh, Cody Rhodes.
Cody Rhodes and Becky staying on Raw.
Well, I think Cody Rhodes is low-hanging fruit, right? Like, I heard maybe some people wanted him to go to SmackDown to finish the story with Roman Reigns. But to be honest, I mean, they had a good match. They had a decent build. But I think that Cody Rhodes' home is over on Monday Night Raw. I think he screams Monday Night Raw. And he's the biggest babyface they have in the company right now. So they needed something to offset Roman Reigns' star power over on Raw. And look, I just said that before in Seth Rollins, but I just think that Cody Rhodes just screams Raw in all the right ways. And he's a guy that I think that since he's most recently come back on the Royal Rumble has really given Raw, kind of a kick in the back end to really make it kind of must watch, easy enough for me to say, television, when a lot of times before Cody Rhodes showed up, it was really a drag to get through. And that's not to say that they didn't have good wrestlers and good characters, but I think Cody Rhodes is a fresh face, and he still is in a lot of ways in that honeymoon phase with the crowd. So I think it was low-hanging fruit, and I think it was the right call. Becky Lynch, I mean, she's kind of become a staple of Monday Night Raw. Like, I can't even remember the last time that Becky Lynch was over on SmackDown, which is kind of weird to say because when they brought back the brand split in 2016, she was the first woman drafted to SmackDown Live at the time, and she is the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion. But pretty much ever since the whole man character started, what is it now, like 4 or 5 years ago, crazy how long it's been, she has really kind of found a home over on Monday Night Raw. So I think both of them were kind of predictable choices, but ultimately the right ones.
Yeah, Cody Rhodes has settled in very nicely on Raw and is their number one babyface, arguably against Seth Rollins. I mean, that's a debate to be had, but I would also think that Cody and Seth, I mean, how can it not be one of them winning the World Heavyweight Championship? I would imagine if there's a tournament that starts after Backlash, that those two are in the final at Saudi Arabia. That's my guess 4 weeks out here. But it has to be one of them. I mean, it's just got to be. But yeah, Becky Lynch surprised me when I heard her name in round one. Given what she's done over the last several months, I'm like, she's round one. She's your round one pick. I mean, not that she's not a big name, but it's kind of a what have you done for me lately business. And with Becky Lynch, it's not like she's done a whole lot. She's been kind of meddling around with the ice cold damage control, and no one seems to be super interested in it. She's often cut out of the Hulu cuts on Monday Night Raw, so it was a bit surprising here. I'm like, Becky Lynch in round one, you think she'd be a round two pick or something, but I mean, I don't hate it. They can do a lot more with her than they've done lately. That's for sure. But having Bianca Belair as coming to SmackDown, as we mentioned earlier, is the right pick, and Cody Rhodes staying on Raw is also, I would agree, the right pick. Do you have any issue with the fact that WWE so far in this draft has not split up any of the teams or factions?
Not overly, because, and I believe you brought this up on the Weekend Review, is that when WWE does that historically, they ultimately go back to just reforming the factions or tag teams, like when they split tag teams just by the draft. And here are some examples. They did that with the Judgment Day, the Dudley Boys, and the APA in the first ever draft. in 2002. Bradshaw went to Raw, Farouk went to SmackDown, Devon went to SmackDown, and Bubba went to Raw. And within a year, both teams were back together. And why? Because there was no real payoff to these teams being split. There wasn't a reason just beyond they got picked by the separate general managers at the time. And I just think it leaves a lot to be desired when you go that way by breaking up tag teams. And I think you even saw it recently in 2016. I'm pretty sure they did that with the Wyatt family, where they broke up the Wyatt family because of the draft. And then within 6 to 12 months, they were back together over on SmackDown or on Monday Night Raw. So I think that, and again, you brought this up on the Weekend Review, so you've already said this, but I'm in 100% agreement. If you want to split up a team, obviously the most popular one, most popular candidate would have been the Street Profits. You want to do it in a way that, like you said, there's some jealousy involved, or, you know, they're both vying for the same title or whatever. One makes a heel turn, whatever you have. It's just better to go that route where there's actually some personal substance involved, as opposed to just like, oh, you went to Raw, you went to SmackDown, therefore we'll go on our merry ways. Because just inherently it will make the crowd want to see that tag team eventually come back together, because they were just broken up so unceremoniously.
Yeah, that is really the only thing I can think about. I know a lot of people were angry about the fact that no teams were split up. It's always a package deal. What the hell's going on? But again, like a lot of times teams, tag teams and factions, the very purpose of them is to create single stars out of them. And you're not going to be able to do that if you just kind of hard cut them off from each other, and you're not able to build a story. If you know, for one of them to turn heel and the other one's a big baby face, like you're not able to do that if they're just like kind of cut and dry. Oh, you're no longer together anymore. Oh, okay, I guess that's it. Like it's a very anticlimactic way and not a great business decision to just do that. Now, that said, not every single split needs to result in a feud. I mean, sometimes you can have groups just disband and there is no conflict, and really sometimes there are teams and factions that people don't want to see them fight. There really isn't a favorite among the team, and so that can happen. And you know, I think that's more the exception than the rule, but I think that's the reason why. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to beat a dead horse from what I said last night and what you just said, but yeah. So outside of that, I mean, again, we had Edge go to SmackDown, Riddle go to Raw. Those were the other big moves. I know, again, we can get to round 2, but what were some other thoughts you had on the draft, Edge, Riddle, or anything else?
Well, the one that I thought was the most interesting, and I think it was primarily because it was a return that really went under the radar, was AJ Styles going to SmackDown with the OC. And again, you brought this up on the Weekend Review, so not to sound repetitive, but the OC minus AJ Styles is heavily irrelevant, and they are on the island of what did they call them? The ocean of obscurity. Is that what Paul Heyman said? Yep. That is the OC without AJ Styles. But as soon as you bring AJ Styles back into the fold, all of the sudden you want to see that group, and it's true. It's because Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows and I guess Meechin are good henchmen. They fit that role very well, in my opinion. But they need the leader. They need the figurehead. They need the mouthpiece. They need the star power. And AJ Styles checks all those boxes. And I know he hasn't held a world title in, my God, now we're going on, 4 or 5 years at this point. I think the last time he held the WWE Championship was when he lost it to Daniel Bryan at Survivor Series 2018. So we're coming up on 5 years. AJ Styles is still, in my opinion, a 100% main eventer. He's a guy that brings star power. And I think he's someone that still has a little runway left in being that main eventer. And I think him going over to SmackDown, the house that AJ Styles built, let's not forget that when they brought back the brand split in 2016, he absolutely legitimized SmackDown Live at the time and made it feel as an equal to Monday Night Raw, way before it went to Fox, and certainly way before the head of the table tribal chief version of Roman Reigns we've come to know over the last 3 years. So in my mind, AJ Styles going to SmackDown is going to be a major, major X factor in how this Brown split ultimately plays out. And in my mind, one of the sneaky picks of the draft.
It was sneaky and it was unexpected. I actually said, wow, I said to myself, they're all still employed here. I mean, really, because it felt like I hadn't seen them in forever. And, again, without AJ, that group is super vanilla, and it's no disrespect, but they've got no real star power outside of AJ Styles, and AJ Styles he is the soul of that group, and it is what it is. And I think eventually this is going to lead to an OC versus Bloodline story that is maybe headlined by AJ versus Roman Reigns for the title. That, of course, AJ probably has no chance of winning, but it'll be fun and it's new and all that. And your point about AJ using SmackDown, or rather elevating SmackDown several years ago, is a good one that we all kind of forgot. He really did take that brand by himself, nearly, and elevate it to a status that it hadn't been in a very long time. Because don't forget, it wasn't too long ago that SmackDown was like a really bad show, and like no one watched it. It was very much a Monday Night Raw heavy umbrella of WWE, and people had kind of taken SmackDown as it's kind of like Sunday Night Heat. You don't really need to watch. That has obviously changed over the last several years, and that's a good thing. But yeah, that was a very sneaky pick that came out of absolutely nowhere. And I didn't hate it. I thought that was a nice nice addition to SmackDown that I'm looking at and going, okay, they got something here for the Bloodline to oppose. So again, I'll leave it to you. Any other picks or things that you wanted to discuss?
Well, I just kind of piggyback off of that. I think that they've set themselves up nicely here on SmackDown for Roman Reigns to have a long list of fresh competitors. And, I look at AJ Styles, I look at Bobby Lashley, and to me, you have your Roman Reigns story set up all the way probably until Survivor Series, if not maybe a bit longer, because those are two guys that, look, they're both probably on the back nines of their career. Both have not as great days ahead as they have behind them. And neither of them are the future of the company, but those are two guys that, in my mind, have a lot of star power and have not gone against Roman Reigns a whole lot. Like, we know Bobby and Roman had a feud, I believe, in 2018 when Bobby first came back to the company, but that was old Roman Reigns. AJ versus Roman, I don't think we've seen that since, I want to say AJ was the first guy to challenge Roman for the WWE Championship when Roman won it in 2016 away from Triple H at WrestleMania 32. So unless I'm missing something, we haven't seen an AJ Roman match in a main event level setting in 7 years now. So in my mind, I just love the way that they've set themselves up on SmackDown for Roman Reigns, and it's going to feel fresh. It's going to feel interesting. And, it's two guys that have been so far away from Roman Reigns for such an extended period of time that I think that it's really going to work out. And I think that this is why you want hard brand splits, for moments like this, with when you finally do the draft and you finally do make major changes like this, all of the sudden you're saying, oh my God, how have we not seen Lashley versus Roman or AJ versus Roman? This is the biggest benefit of having a brand split.
Oh yeah, this is where it gets fun, because you're looking at the roster as you have, and many others, and going, all right, for Roman Reigns, who do we got up? Who's next? Who's a matchup that he hasn't had yet or in a very long time? And AJ and Bobby stand out for sure. Among a couple of others, but I mean, there's Edge, who came to SmackDown, but honestly, we saw that a couple of years ago at WrestleMania 37. Was it 37? That they had the triple threat with Daniel Bryan.
Yep.
So that, it's been a hot minute since Edge and Roman Reigns had their match, and Edge has been very clear that he has about a year left. I would imagine concluding at WrestleMania 40, hopefully against John Cena. I keep advocating for that because to me it's a perfect fit and a perfect ending to his career, and I think that there's a lot that they could draw from there. But again, So without getting too much further in the draft, of course, getting it around 4 and beyond is a discussion for another time. But I'm with you. I think this is what you're seeing of when a draft is done correctly, and you're seeing new matchups now. You're seeing the rosters settle themselves in, and you're thinking, okay, who could match up with who? Have we not seen this? And it's not just Roman; it's other champions and non-champions as well. You're in the women's and men's division. You're like, oh, cool. Okay, I could see this and this. When are they going to get to this and this? And amazingly, out of all the matchups, they've hit home runs, except for the damn Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns one that I'm baffled by, because I'm hoping they have bigger plans than just having him on the brand and having him lose to Roman at a B pay-per-view or something. But now, before we go, I know you wanted to also discuss some of these free agents, and I made a case actually stronger for it than against it last night. But what did you think about these quote-unquote free agents that WWE announced on Twitter of Ali, Drew McIntyre, Von Wagner, and Omos?
Well, I think Drew McIntyre's over on Monday Night Raw, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I meant Ziggler. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm looking
Ziggler.
at the name Drew McIntyre. No, Ziggler is what I meant. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't have too much to add to it, honestly. I think that you made a very good point that I would rather that they be assigned to a respective brand. But if WWE knows and Triple H knows and has a feeling that these are guys that he's going to want to be able to interchange and use as he pleases, you might as well just being upfront about it, and at least you're giving it a reason, not make up reasons as you go, like the quarterly invitational or the wild card rule or whatever. At least he's saying upfront, these are guys that are going to float between brands and they're free agents. Like they did with Brock Lesnar tonight. Brock Lesnar is a free agent, can go from show to show, and that makes sense. It makes sense for a guy like Brock Lesnar to be a free agent, or John Cena. Omos, I think you described him as a spectacle, and you have the MVP factor to make it make more sense in storyline that he can negotiate into his contract. And, is Omos really going to be intertwined in an intimate program that's, exclusive to SmackDown or Raw? Probably not. As you brought up with Ali and Ziggler, these are in-house enhancement talents that you're just going to want to plug and play, presumably for guys who are coming up from NXT who you just want to put over in short order. So it's not like they're making, Randy Orton or Drew McIntyre like free agents. They're really trying to make guys who really won't have main eventer heavy implications. But one guy I wanted to ask you about, and we haven't heard his name in a long time, and we haven't heard his name brought up for the draft, and we can kind of talk about what this means for his future, but you know where I'm going with this?
I've got two names. My guess is Randy Orton, but also Big E.
No, I was going to say Bray Wyatt.
Ooh, yeah.
What the hell is going on with Bray Wyatt?
The last we all heard was that he had some kind of quote unquote physical issue, and that some people speculated it was COVID that led to a heart issue, or he got an infection or whatever. I mean, that's why I didn't trust when they came out with that. I go, guys, it's more than what they're leading it on to be. I thought it was part mental, part physical. The guy has, a history of mental illnesses and issues. And so, if it was that, I was hoping, hey, get yourself right and come back when you can. But maybe it is fully physical, but I don't know. It's been a hot damn minute. My God, when was the last time we saw Bray Wyatt? A couple of months ago, or right after the beloved Pitch Black match, the Mountain Dew Pitch Black match with LA Knight? I mean, that was the last time I think I remember seeing him doing his weird kind of meta backstage, watching himself on the Firefly Funhouse all over the damn place segments. But what do I think they do with him? If he was going to be drafted to a brand, I would say SmackDown, because eventually he's got to have a program with Roman Reigns. We've been talking about that since he came back nearly a year ago.
Yeah, I'm actually just reading something on Wrestling Inc. that apparently Road Dogg on a podcast said that they just got a new writer for Bray Wyatt. So I don't know. Like I've said, Bray Wyatt is a guy to me that I've always given the benefit of the doubt because I want to like him. And when done correctly, I think he is one of the most fascinating wrestlers they have at their disposal. But it's almost getting to a point now with Bray Wyatt that even for someone like me, who's always been one of his biggest proponents, someone who has always tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, always had time for his hokiness, and that's coming from someone like myself who typically doesn't like hokiness in wrestling. But for me, I'm almost reaching the end of my rope with just like kind of like you know what, or get off the pot. Like, I really just need some consistency from Bray Wyatt on television at this point.
Yeah, that's a big problem when you, and again, I don't know if and when he returns, if they're going to continue with his storyline of Uncle Howdy, and do people even care about the identity of him? Is he going to continue with the Firefly Funhouse? Are they going to just start clean? It's been long enough they could just start clean, I think, and people would just get on board with it because he is so damn intriguing. But it's insane when we think about this. Not only is his character kind of all over the damn place, even though we love to watch him, but also he's had one match since he was back for about 5 minutes, which is absolutely mind-blowing that he's had one match since, I think he came back at, was it in August or September this past year? So, like, it's been like 8 months or so, and we've had one match out of Bray Wyatt. That's not encouraging if you're looking to him for a main event, Roman Reigns and potential Bray Wyatt matchup, that he's able to, number one, put on a good match, stay safe, and not hurt himself or his opponent. You know, it's not a great case to be made if you're looking to put him in that position.
And it's unfortunate because, you know, I remember when he returned in, what was it, mid-October at at Extreme Rules, and you and I were talking about, like, hey, could this be a guy to, you know, face off against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania? Could he be the one to dethrone Roman Reigns? Is there a bigger babyface on SmackDown? There was rumors that they had positioned him as the top babyface on SmackDown. And now, like, what is it, 6 months later, it's just like, we're just back to square one with Bray Wyatt. He's nowhere to be found. No one knows what's going on. They're not talking about him at the draft. I don't know. It's very unfortunate. It's just one of those situations where you almost think, like, maybe this was a situation where Vince wasn't completely in the wrong.
No, I mean, time will tell. Maybe he'll come back, be better than ever. Maybe he's getting in shape now. Maybe, I mean, we don't know. It's been radio silence on Bray Wyatt, so all we're talking about is speculation. But we can talk about what we've seen, and what we've seen has been a 5-minute match that was very underwhelming with LA Knight. That actually LA Knight, even in the loss, came out better and was actually better off for it than Bray Wyatt was, even in a victory, which is just crazy. Which also speaks to LA Knight's star power, and I can't wait to see what they do with him over the next year or two. But yeah, Bray Wyatt right now, I would keep him on SmackDown just for that. You know, you can plug and play him anywhere because he is so intriguing. Crowd loves him, and he's such an interesting character, deep, all that, if you're looking for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting character, and Randy Orton, I would imagine, goes to Raw with Matt Riddle. You know, even though I'd like to see a Randy and Roman matchup, it's so, you know, at some point we got to eventually get away from, Roman. Everything seems to be centered around this matchup with Roman, that matchup with Roman. The thing is, now that we have a championship on Raw, we may not have to think like that, as we've been trained to do over the last, nearly 3 years.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. Do you think that there's any breakout star potentially coming from this brand split? Like one that you could pinpoint?
Well, Shinsuke Nakamura, he seems to be getting a push as of late. I think we all kind of know his ceiling, though. If I'm looking to an actual, like, kind of sneaky pick, I mean, I'm looking through the who actually got drafted here. I mean, you could have Santos Escobar. He's having good match after good match after good match. He was originally part of Legado del Fantasma that morphed into the LWO. He's had a nice little run over the last several months. You know, I think I'd look to him. You know, some of the call-ups from NXT, I'd like to see the complete draft results, you know, from Monday Night Raw that come up. I'd imagine that since a lot of the women got drafted from SmackDown, that some of the men will be drafted from NXT to Raw this, you know, from these results, but time will tell. As far as the women go, I mean, I like what I've seen from Dakota Kai. I'm getting them mixed up. The one that's challenging for the women's championship, Io Sky. I think she has the potential to have a breakout, especially considering that we're imagining she's going to feud with Bayley. So there.
And the one thing, and I know I keep saying the one thing before we close it out, but there's just so many ways to go with this, is, do you think that this is official, like almost like the unofficial start of the Triple H era, because like we got the start of it last summer, but it took some time for him to like get his hands on the wheel and start grooming it in his direction and his vision. Then you get Vince coming back in January and all that brouhaha that took place over the WrestleMania weekend with the sale and Vince being involved in the Raw after Mania. But it seems like since then, it's been back with Triple H in the driver's seat. They've even mentioned it several times on air of Michael Cole saying he runs the place now. Do you get the feeling that this is all Triple H?
I'm going to take it at face value and say yes. I mean, of course he has input. He cares about what the network executives want. They all want ratings, of course. And it's obviously other people in his ear, upper management. I'm sure Vince is in his ear too, even though Vince, let's again take things at face value, has no impact on the creative, at least in the day-to-day stuff. But I mean, Vince did say he has the high level, quote unquote, high level input on creative. So I'm sure Vince McMahon did have a say in what Triple H, or at least put some input into Triple H's ear, and whether or not Triple H adopted that, we don't know. So I think Vince had something to say about it. Of course, executives, network executives, upper management. But ultimately, if Triple H is the end game and he is the one that is making the decisions, then this is all Triple H. If it comes down to one man and we're to believe that Triple H is that man, then sure, this is finally the roster that Triple H wanted to design, and he's getting a clean slate. He doesn't have any Vince McMahon hangover. This is all Triple H now. And until I hear otherwise, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't believe it. Really, Vince is in charge, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that. Let's just go with Triple H is in charge until we hear otherwise. So, yeah, that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to take it at face value, too. I remember my buddy saying that he had heard on a podcast or something that Endeavor had stepped in or something and kind of booted Vince back to the office, for lack of better terms, and that they were very, very aware of what I think it was on the Bump or something. It was trending like fire Vince, something along those lines. And I think, again, this is all something I just heard through the grapevine, is that like Endeavor did actually catch wind and was made very well aware of the fans' vitriol towards Vince. And I think that the product since that infamous Raw following WrestleMania has been better. And look, again, this is just something very, very on the surface, but I just see Triple H kind of shaping things into how it used to be kind of in the Ruthless Aggression era. Like, he's, for all intents and purposes, they're going to retire the Universal Championship, right? Like, it's not going to be called the undisputed WWE Universal Championship forever. I imagine it's just going to go back to being known as the WWE Championship, because we've had two unifications before, when it was the WWE and WCW and the WWE and World Heavyweight. And eventually the WWE Championship inevitably always just ends up cannibalizing the other world title. And he brings back the World Heavyweight Championship that he really made famous in the mid-2000s on Monday Night Raw. He restructures the brands with the titles that they used to have during the Ruthless Aggression era. So there's just a lot of signs to me that are pointing to it being all Triple H, but I'm also maybe wanting to believe that as well.
Yeah, it's hard not to be skeptical, because we know that Vince has found his way back into the company, and he's all of a sudden the chairman. Stephanie resigns, and then all of a sudden you hear at an ESPN interview that he is, he's in creative, but he's not in the weeds, which is a whole bunch of nonsense. I think he was trying to get back to exactly what he was doing on the day-to-day. He says one thing, but we all know what he really wants, because it's Vince McMahon. So, but the good thing is, the Endeavor has the majority voting power. Vince McMahon can no longer make the ultimate decisions anymore. The Endeavor does, in management, do have say over Vince McMahon, which is really kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, the good thing is that sale has happened, because now we have somebody who can tell Vince, nope, you're going back here, right? I mean, so whether or not that's happened, or they just say it's happened to save face, we don't know. I mean, honestly, just give us the best damn product. But you can smell Vince from a mile away with creative. Some of the stuff leading into WrestleMania, we were just like, yeah, this is, especially in the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, that was heavily shrouded in controversy, was not the best Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, and people were not happy. And you could just smell Vince McMahon, because we all know what his style is. We know what he likes, the chaos backstage, all that kind of stuff. And let's just hope that if Triple H is able to just run his own damn show and everyone will leave him the hell alone, because he'll make some mistakes, but ultimately I think he is the right person in this position. So, all right, well, I'm gonna conclude things here. I think we went over the draft, and of course we'll have much more to talk about next week with the full draft results in our face, and we can start to speculate about more potential matchups and any big things that transpire. And of course, it'll be after Backlash, so then all the rosters will be in place, and we'll be past Backlash and heading towards the Night of Champions event in Saudi Arabia and towards 1,000 days. So, any final comments or thoughts?
No, just I think this is going to be a very interesting month for WWE and a very exciting one, if I'm a betting man, because May usually seems like a lull, but you have 2 pay-per-views in 3 weeks, one of which going to be a major one in Saudi Arabia celebrating Roman Reigns' 1,000 days, and a brand new restructuring of either roster on both shows. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting month during a period that typically is a downtime in WWE.
That's true. Yeah, it really usually is after WrestleMania. People come down and go to other shows, or it starts to get summertime and all that kind of stuff. But right now, I mean, the gas is on. I don't think they're letting up, and I like that. With so much going on, so much change, and social media keeping things alive with discussion. But yeah, absolutely. And before you go, let everyone know about your latest retro episode with Seth Rollins, I believe, is for his WWE Championship run, right?
Yeah, his WWE Championship run in 2015 won a title that he never lost. He had to relinquish it due to an injury. I believe it was to his meniscus or something in his knee. One of the long string of injuries that he had during that time period. And it was one that I thought was a pretty good run, and one that people don't talk about a lot. During that period of time, they only had one world champion, and there was no brand split. So he was the guy in WWE, and he was just 1 year removed, or not even a year removed, from detaching himself from the Shield. In my opinion, the best cash-in of all time, save for maybe the inaugural one of Edge at New Year's Revolution 2006. But a very, very interesting to go back and review what he did during that stretch. And for this week, it's looking like I think I'm going to give the history of the World Heavyweight Championship back starting from 2002 to when it was retired in 2013. I think we need a refresher on what exactly that title means.
Great timing with that, absolutely, and reminding us, even though it may not look the same, it's still, the lineage is carried with it, even, again, physically, if it's not representative of the exact championship. I wish they kind of left it alone. I'm not a fan of the big logo in the middle. They just kind of kept it as is, but title belts evolve, and to me, it's about more what it means and the lineage and who's held it and all that kind of thing. That's more important than how it looks, at least in my opinion. But absolutely, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And everybody go check out Retro. Drops every single Friday. And Anthony, you and I will be chatting again in a week.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to it. Take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.